Great to see you again. This week I'm very excited because I have a very good friend of mine, and that is Amol Patel. He's a Stanford alumni, and he's also a very successful entrepreneur in the mobile arena. And I would like for Amol to introduce himself, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Homero. Pleasure to be here back at the farm. I graduated doing my master's in electrical engineering and computer science from Stanford. And in the course of my entrepreneurial journey, I launched India's first mobile ticketing and payments solution. After that, I've been at PayPal for a little over 6 years now, always in the mobile group. And it's just been fascinating to see the growth of mobile commerce. I remember when I joined PayPal 6 years back, we did about $5 million in mobile commerce volume. And this year we are on a run rate of over $20 billion in mobile payments alone. So it's just absolutely fabulous and fantastic to see the mobile ecosystem grow and the opportunities it presents across multiple dimensions, including healthcare.
And that's why I feel we're very fortunate in having you here. You have been very successful into that arena, but certainly we would like to learn those lessons from you so we can implement those in the healthcare system. Okay, Amol, one of the first questions I have for you is, how do you see the present landscape when it comes to mobile technology throughout the world? What are the opportunities for entrepreneurs in this arena?
Sure. It's a fascinating field. If you look at the global population right now, we're at about 7 billion people, and we're seeing a little over 6.3 billion mobile subscribers. So 85% of the planet is actually connected through this mobile device. Now there's varying levels of sophistication globally. In emerging markets, you have lower end feature phones. In developed markets, you have smartphones, which essentially put a computer in your pocket. But it's just fascinating the connectivity, the reach that mobile devices have, and with that, the potential impact for change and the acceleration it provides. Whether you look at commerce, whether you look at healthcare, all kinds of opportunities exist, right? From remote diagnostics in healthcare to patient data, to scheduling, to monitoring chronic diseases, etc.
Can you tell us just a little bit for clarification, what are these emerging markets?
Absolutely. So over 80% of the mobile subscriber growth is in emerging markets. And what we're seeing is that consumers from a low-end device, they are able to do very basic things which are incredibly powerful. For example, in Kenya, there is a mobile commerce and payment system called M-Pesa, where last year the equivalent of roughly 20% of Kenya's GDP was transacted through this mobile payments platform. So it's absolutely mind-boggling. On the healthcare side, we're seeing basic applications that are starting to take shape in Ghana and Nigeria. What we're seeing is that because the counterfeit drugs are a big issue, you can go to a pharmacy and before you purchase the medicine, you can text a serial number on that medicine to a short code, and you get a response back that shows whether this is a genuine drug or not. So especially anti-malarial drugs and things like that, we're seeing kind of widespread adoption on that.
So Amol, globally there's been great success in mobile technologies to pretty much be utilized in online sales, online banking, so many economical transactions, even in underdeveloped markets. Why do you see that hasn't happened when it comes to healthcare?
In the commerce arena, we're seeing a lot of successes around mobile payments, whether you look at M-Pesa in a developing market or the likes of a PayPal from a developed markets perspective. There are multiple reasons. It has to do with technology. So these these payment schemes cater to the local needs. So there's a very clear understanding of whose pain point are you solving, who's the consumer, who's the merchant. It has to do with the business model. So consumers don't have to pay subscriptions or heavy fees upfront, but affordability is really important. And for example, in a payment system like PayPal, only if a transaction happens does a percentage of the transaction fee get charged. So there are no upfront costs. If you look at the healthcare system, there are still those business models still need to evolve, but we're seeing progress made in that direction. For example, in India, in the state of Bihar, they did an interesting pilot where they used IVR, which is interactive voice response, where community healthcare workers would take a stack of cards and they'd have a mobile device. And depending on, and they were focused more on children and maternity and pregnancy and things like that, because infant mortality rates were high. So from an education and awareness standpoint, they would pick the topic, they would just dial that number, and you'd get a recording of what are the precautions the mother needs to take, what are the vaccinations the child needs to have, and things like that. So keeping in mind the target demographic, whether it's lower end feature phone market or smartphone market, and really understanding the behavioral patterns of those consumers, I think would go a long way in figuring out how do you leverage those opportunities in mobile health.
Very good. And I just want to make a note, because lots of people would say, well, why do we have to worry about like mobile paying system when we have healthcare solutions? And I think any of these solutions has to be sustainable, and there has to be some type of economical input in this. Also, Amol has been very good at pointing out that there's going to be a challenge with literacy among the users of any of these platforms, and therefore by having creative systems in which, for example, by the use of cards, you don't really have to rely on someone reading or writing in order to receive or express anything about their health to others. But well, along those same lines, I would like to ask you, what are the lessons that we could learn from people like you in healthcare? Clearly, you are mainly on the other side of the spectrum with paying systems, banking, etc., throughout emerging markets. How can we learn from you and implement that into healthcare?
I think, and there are various initiatives on these multiple dimensions, but one is kind of figuring out the interoperability, right? How does a patient have access to his or her medical records in a secure and compliant way that respects privacy? But kind of information sharing needs to happen with the right checks and balances in place. Understanding where the pain points are. For example, I just had a baby daughter a couple of months back, and when were at the hospital, then there are so many places where I say, okay, hey, if only I could have this through my mobile device, which is your kind of trusted companion through all this, making sure you're kind of registering different steps of the way of any disease or problem that the patient has, having a trusted companion that makes their lives easier in terms of what are the next steps, understanding the business model. There's kind of insurance companies, there's healthcare providers, there's community workers, there's patients, there's back office systems. So sometimes it does feel that it's a fairly complex ecosystem that we need to manage. But at the same time, I'm pretty confident that that by solving, kind of taking tiny steps in the right direction, I think we'll be well on our way to really leveraging the incredible tool that the mobile phone is, and driving ubiquitous adoption.
Very good. Amol, this is a global course. This is a platform where we have students from pretty much anywhere throughout the world. Uh, in your experience with paying system mobile phones, which are the markets that are right now hot markets? Where should people invest their time, money? Certainly because there's the infrastructure of mobile phones, so we can use it in healthcare.
Well, I think the opportunities or the hot markets are pretty much everywhere. You just need to understand the interplay of the mobile ecosystem. For example, in markets like the US, where a vast majority of the phones are tied to the distribution contracts through the mobile carrier, you need to understand how you can drive distribution and discoverability by working with the mobile operators. For example, AT&T has a very vibrant mHealth program where they have kind of APIs and developer toolkits that entrepreneurs can leverage. That's just to pick an example. In emerging markets, in markets like India, you have more of an open distribution model where the handsets are distributed in the marketplace, and you can kind of work closely with the handset vendors to drive discoverability of your application. Because at the end of the day, discoverability is very important, and one needs to understand the kind of ecosystem that you're in. Here in North America, for example, you have postpaid contracts. In a lot of emerging markets, these are prepaid phones, prepaid devices where you pay as you go model. So by really understanding what are the mobile ecosystem drivers, as well as what are the cost drivers, I think would go a long way in figuring out how entrepreneurs can leverage this opportunity. But at the same time, things are certainly converging. So what I mean by that is you have, take for example Android, right? The Android operating system. We're seeing handsets as low as $20, Android handsets in markets like India. So affordability, I think, is no longer going to be an issue for people who want to have a phone that is kind of feature rich and can do some of the basic things that a smartphone does, right? And there are data plans in India, for example, where you get around 2 gigabytes of data for roughly 150 rupees, which is about $2.50. So, so there's really strong trends that are going in kind of ubiquitous, strong computing devices through mobile phone, and I think that just opens up the opportunity space for entrepreneurs in the who are looking at mobile health to come up with more and more innovative solutions for the mass market.
Is privacy, confidential information, something that you guys worry about?
Oh, absolutely.
But is that something that we have technology to keep it safe?
Yes,
Because
yes.
that's one of the number one things most people say about mobile health. Well, as long as we don't seem to have that yet, and I would argue that if we have very good lessons of success from your side of view, then we should be able to replicate the same as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's one is there's kind of compliance standards and kind of laws of the land that one needs to respect. But at the same time, there are certainly technologies that are available that kind of securitize things. The example that we like to use is when you're making a credit card transaction, right? This phone is a much orders of magnitude more secure device than just giving your card to a waiter you don't know and who's swiping the card, right? So I mean, there's it's an awareness challenge for sure, but the technology is certainly there, and it's also a matter of educating the different constituents, including patients as well as healthcare providers, to respect that privacy and put the safeguards in place.
Lastly, about the future, we have talked about artificial intelligence engines and how they can help, us do many things in our daily lives. How can we apply those into medicine?
That's a huge opportunity again. By 2020, most estimates say that there'll be 50 billion connected devices. So machine to machine communications will be extremely important and will be a very active field, which in the healthcare space you can think of smart sensors that are constantly feeding data about you. I mean, you're seeing kind of Fitbit and kind of such devices that
Wearable
are
devices.
available here, wearable computing devices here in the developed markets. But increasingly, there's when you all these sensors are constantly providing data, and when you are putting that data in the cloud, so you don't need kind of a lot of rich processing power on the device. You could have a distributed system where a fair bit of processing is done in the cloud. Then you can certainly have amazing results around kind of analytics, around just patterning of the patient, and so that's a very important field. We are seeing with Siri, when the Apple launched the Siri, its virtual personal assistant, you kind of start seeing the notion of artificial dialogue. And when you put much more computing power behind that, if even in emerging markets where the phones may not be as sophisticated, but you have this interactive voice response and IVR system where you just make a simple phone call, but you are querying the back end of kind of answers to common problems,
Yes,
to
exactly.
answers to even more sophisticated problems. I think the opportunities are just enormous.
Which, with no question, that's a fabulous proposition of value to many people with no access to healthcare information. Well, having said that, I would like to thank you for your friendship and for your collaboration with us. I know we have a massive audience. Should anyone have any comments, questions, certainly they can send them to us, and then we can refer them to Amol. And hopefully, through an artificial intelligence engine, those questions can be answered. Anyway, I would like to thank you again.
Thank you very much, Omero. Pleasure
Great.
to be here.